All right, guys, this is the third part of what will be a four-part series. And today we will talk about the rise of Adolf Hitler. Uh, Hitler is probably one of the most interesting figures in history. And I will tell you, he is the most influential man of the 20th century, Adolf Hitler. Uh, Now, when I say that, I always like to clarify what I mean by that. I don't think Adolf Hitler was a good guy. I think he was a monster. I think he was terrible. When I say influential, I mean because of Adolf Hitler, because you have the Joker, you have to have the Batman. So that's what I always put. Now, Adolf Hitler, there's a couple of little interesting facts that I want to share with you on Hitler. And all this is in the PowerPoint. And I do hope that you go through the PowerPoint and you look at it. Uh, and some of this will you'll see maybe one or two questions on your attendance, but a lot of the stuff you kind of see on your maybe on your exam that you're going to take. Hitler takes over in 1933, which is always interesting. FDR takes office in 32. Hitler takes office in 33. It's kind of interesting. Hitler will create the swastika. That is a Hitler invention. Uh, Hitler was not supported by the German army. That's something I always like to point out. The German army did not support Adolf Hitler. So your question would be is, how did Adolf Hitler take control? Well, Adolf Hitler takes control by a group of guys called the Brown Shirts. He uses these guys, and they're basically thugs, to help him take over the government. Once he gets over the government, and he takes it over legally, by the way, guys, Adolf Hitler was arrested for trying to legally overthrow the government, and they arrest him. And at his trial, Adolf Hitler will tell the judge that, look, you may put me in jail, but guess what? As soon as I get out of jail, I will do this again. So he takes legal means of the government. Now, that is a test question, and you'll see that. So once Hitler takes over, let's kind of explain to you how he does that. He uses these guys called the Brown Shirts. These are just thugs, is really what they are. Once they help him take over, okay, once he gets over, then he will create the Nazi Party and he will create the SS. Now, the SS were basically Hitler's chosen death squad, so to speak. And in one night, and it's called the Night of the Long Knives, Hitler will go in and he'll have all his enemies killed. And all those guys, those brown shirts, all those guys that helped him get in control, Hitler will kill them. The thing to always tell my students is Hitler is the great double crosser of all times. Anybody Hitler ever deals with, he always double crosses them. The men who put him in power, he eventually has them killed. The common question they usually have, a student will raise his hand and go, Mr. Offer, why did he do that? Well, he didn't trust them. He didn't trust them because they were thugs. And so he will have them killed. I always tell everybody Winston Churchill's reputation is a direct result of Adolf Hitler. If it had not been for Adolf Hitler, Winston Churchill probably would have been a footnote in history. That's always important to remember. And a couple of things before we end up this thing, I'm going to kind of explain a couple of questions that I have on Hitler. I want you to go through the PowerPoint. One of the things I always point out to my students is whenever you see Adolf Hitler in a movie, they usually choose the ugliest, littlest man. I think when they advertise looking for ugly little man to be Adolf Hitler. If you look at some of the PowerPoints, Adolf Hitler's really not that ugly of a guy. Actually, Winston Churchill was a lot rougher looking because Churchill probably spent all his time smoking cigars and drinking. By the way, Hitler did not smoke or drink, and he was a vegetarian. I've always found that very interesting about him. Now, a couple of questions we have, and we're going to finish it up with Adolf Hitler, was the fact, I always have these questions, and I always was Adolf Hitler as a child abused? Yes, he was. He was abused as a child. What did he want to be when he was younger? Now, a lot of students I'll usually have a student raise his hand and go, he wanted to be a painter. That's true later on in life. But when he was a little kid, he wanted to be a priest. He spent a lot of time in front of mirrors preaching and practicing. I know that sounds very scary, but yes, he wanted to be a priest. Was he a good student? Actually, Hitler wasn't. One of the big misconceptions I have that people really think is that Hitler is this military genius, that Hitler is this great mastermind. Guys, Hitler will make several terrible, terrible military decisions. And you know, I mean, Dunkirk. He had the English trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk. He could have destroyed the entire British army. He does not do that. Okay, he has Britain primed for an invasion. Operation Sea Lion. They have bombed and bombed Britain, and all they have to do is cross the English Channel, the Germans, and take them. He doesn't do that. Instead, what does he do? He will turn his forces on Operation Barbarossa, and you will see that on a test question. Operation Barbarossa was the invasion of Russia. Yes, the Germans will invade Russia. Terrible, terrible decision, guys. What? Now, in the question, usually I'll have a student that will raise their hand and go, Mr. Offer, why did he do that if it was such a terrible thing? Well, a couple of things. Number one, Adolf Hitler hated the Russians. Couldn't stand them. On Adolf Hitler's list of people I don't like, the Russians were number one. We were probably number two, and somewhere down there was England. But he needed the oil reserves, guys. Russia had massive oil and gas reserves, and Hitler's armies needed the oil to continue this war. And that was one of the reasons he went in. But no nation, pay attention to what I'm saying, guys, no nation in the history of mankind has gone into Russia and successfully conquered them. It's too big, it's too vast. Napoleon's armies went into Russia and they froze to death. Adolf Hitler's Panzer's divisions, his Nazi divisions, his German armies will go into Russia and they will literally starve to death. So he did not know history, or he'd have never made that mistake. We talked about Hitler was not a smoker or a drinker. I always thought that was kind of interesting. When he was a young man, he went out and got drunk with some of his buddies. I always tell my college students, some of this y'all can relate to, and got drunk with his friends and woke up on the side of a ditch after going out drinking all night and was so embarrassed never would drink again. So when you see these movies of Adolf Hitler, I see him from time, and he's sitting at the dining room table drinking wine. He didn't. The interesting thing is, guys, FDR was a smoker, smoked a couple of packs a day. FDR drank all the time. Winston Churchill was a notorious cigar smoker, and he drank from the time he got up to the time he went to bed. Adolf Hitler was a teetotaler. He did not smoke, he did not drink, which I've always thought that was kind of interesting. Was he a womanizer? There's a lot of stories. I had a student that tried to argue with me that Hitler had spent time with a prostitute during World War I, and he had all this gonorrhea or syphilis or whatever. But actually, in Hitler's entire life, he had two physical relationships. One was with his niece, and the other one was with Eva Braun. Eva Braun is a very pretty blonde-haired girl. If you're curious what kind of women did Hitler like, he liked blonde-haired, blue-eyed women. Eva Braun was very athletic, but she was kind of an airhead. We don't know a whole lot about Eva Braun in history. She has never made any speeches. The only thing I've come across her that I think says a lot on her personality is when Neville Chamberlain met with Adolf Hitler in Munich. When Chamberlain and Hitler met, they had to meet in Hitler's apartment because Hitler didn't even have a building to meet in. And Hitler and Chamberlain were sitting on a red couch. In fact, you can Google it. There's a famous picture out there in Hitler's apartment. And as Chamberlain and Hitler talked, Eva Braun was standing in the back, and she leaned over to an SS officer and she said, if he, meaning Chamberlain, only knew what we did on that couch, he wouldn't be sitting there. So that lets you give a little bit of an insight to Eva Braun. Did he suffer depression? Hitler suffered depression his whole life and had actually thought about suicide when he was a young man, thought about suicide when he was in jail, and of course he will commit suicide in his bunker. It was him and Eva sitting there. He will shoot her, then he will shoot himself. Did he believe in the Geneva protocol. You know, the odd thing about Hitler, guys, is Hitler had the ability to use poisonous gas on the Allies, on us, on the Russians. He could have used it in the English. He would not do it. He did not believe in that, which is always kind of odd. Now, he will use gas to kill millions of Jews, but he will not use it against his enemies. Kind of interesting. Hitler was a hypochondriac. During the end of his life, he had all these different problems. They had to give him all this medication. And basically at age 56, he was suffering from Parkinson's disease. I will tell you that I've had a student that argued with me in class that Adolf Hitler survived after the war. He went down to Argentina. He lived down there to 1984. He was nicknamed the Old German. He had married this young black girl and all this other stuff. Guys, Hitler, even if he had been captured by the Soviets, and he was right on the fringe of it. He was in his bunker, and the Red Army was closing in on him. And even if he had got captured by them, and we'll talk more about the Red Army and how brutal of an army they were. Even if he had got captured by the Red Army, guys, he was in the last stages of Parkinson's. He would not have lived that long. Probably would not have even, theoretically, I don't think he would have lived to be tried at Nuremberg. Maybe, but his health was gone. They had him on all kind of morphine injections at the very end. A couple of interesting facts, and I've ran really over on this thing with Hitler. This seems to be, when I'm teaching this face-to-face, one of the more interesting things my students like. They like Adolf Hitler. So was Hitler a Jew? You know, the interesting thing, guys, is Hitler's grandmother worked for a Jewish family, and she got pregnant at the time she was working for him. And she got pregnant because of her employer's son got her pregnant. So that means that basically Hitler's grandfather was a Jew. So he probably had some Jewish descendants. I throw that out there. The last thing I like to say about Hitler before we finish this thing out is, was he a coward? You know, in history, everybody hates Hitler, and I'm with you, but he wasn't, guys. Adolf Hitler was a very decorated soldier during World War II. During World War One. He was considered a runner. They used him to run enemy messages. Although he only made it to the rank of a corporal, Adolf Hitler, in his life, never was a coward. He was dedicated to the German army. You know, and Adolf Hitler, will end this lecture with Hitler as being the very scary thing, guys. Adolf Hitler did not take the German government and overthrow them. He was legally brought in. Once he legally came in, they legally made him, it was called the Enabling Act, and the Enabling Act gave him supreme power. He then made himself the Fuhrer. Once he made himself the Fuhrer, Adolf Hitler had to answer to no one. He was the god to the German people. And the Germans put him into this place. He did not take the government over by force. They voted him in. Always remember, guys, the Treaty of Versailles and how World War I ended sets the footwork for Adolf Hitler to become who he is. If it had not been for that, if the Allies had not punished the Germans, Adolf Hitler would have never been anybody. We probably would have never even heard about him. But he was like this crazy little guy that was at the right place in the right time in history. And he is the most influential person of the 20th century. You'll see that. I think that will be probably your attendance question. And the fact that Adolf Hitler, I don't think he was a coward. I think his war record in the First War. All right, guys, we'll have one more wrap-up session with this, and that will end this session here.